Hi everyone, it is so lovely to be here. Thank you for having me. And today I'm going to be talking to you about the fact that actually your employees are human too. And it seems so strange for me to even have to say that. And yet I know that over and over again, we get so frustrated because our teams, our leaders, our employees, just the people around us, they don't behave in the way we think they should behave. And what is that about? So that's part of the question that I sat with and that we sit with at the Center for Coaching. We work with human beings and facilitating change for human beings. And so what I want to talk about is to say, how are we going to enable people to be more coherent, more whole, and to be more human, which would allow them to be more motivated, more productive, but also to feel seen and heard, to belong, and to want to work for you, to want to engage in the workplace, to want to just give of their best. So I think that's the main purpose of what I want to talk about today. But how do we do that? And something that has fascinated me for ages is that I've looked at the research about what is it that makes it so hard for people to change? What is it that makes it so hard for people to treat each other with respect, to see each other as human beings? Why do we objectify people? How come we behave so strangely towards others? How come we hurt people? How come we wound people? How come we upset people when we don't even mean to do that? And part of it, I think, lies in, there are a number of fields. So philosophically, the space that I work in is a space we call integral coaching, which is premised on the fact that we need to look at the whole human being. There's no point in designing an intervention or working with somebody or even leading somebody or trying to do a process with a group of people at work unless you consider the fact that people are not walking heads. We are not just walking around the world mobile heads that are full of rational cognitive thoughts, which might surprise some of you. But the point is, actually, we are complex, interwoven patterns. So we do have a rational cognitive brain, and we do our best to keep it switched on as often as possible and as much as we can. But what the astonishing thing is that for many people, they have completely forgotten that we also have a heart, we have emotions, and even more importantly, we have an instinctual nervous system. We have a body, and this body is comprising of having an instinctual intelligence that is way more forceful, it's way more strong, and it's way more prevalent than we have ever given credence to it. And so what we've started becoming really curious about is how do we manage the fact that we are not just rational cognitive beings, but we also are beings that have an instinctual nervous system. And so we looked at the area of if I am working with a human being, how can I do so in a way that leaves them feeling seen, heard, and respected? Because if people feel seen, heard, and respected, they are going to be way more engaged, as I said earlier. And so we've come up with kind of 4 dimensions that need to be in place for that to happen. So the first one is around awareness. And the question around awareness is about saying people need to start to understand their own patterns of behavior. And what's really important to understand is that so much of our behavior, some people say even as much as 80% of our behavior, is not behavior that we are necessarily consciously aware of. It's behavior that is driven by our instincts, and our instinctual patterns are laid down and set before even we reach speaking age. So before the age of 2, our instinctual patterns have already been primed and set to a large degree. We call that your structure of interpretation, and it is held in your body, it is held in your nervous system. And so what a lot of people have done is they've said, well, if you behave badly, you're wrong, you're bad. And there's this naming and shaming approach. There's something wrong with you. You can't get on with others. How come you're always fighting with people? How come you always jump when someone unexpectedly lands up next to you? How come you find it difficult to speak in public? Surely you must just practice more. And so people start to feel this shame. And the problem is when we feel shame, a whole lot of other things start happening. We either try and deal with it by becoming aggressive and stepping towards it, or rejecting and having an outward kind of energy to deny, or to even step more into it, say, well, I'll show you. Or we become shameful, we withdraw, and we start to say, well, let me make myself less, let me move away, let me hide. And so you start to find people that are saying, well, I can't speak, or I'm not able to do this, or I'm not strong enough here, and I can't do that there. And so we've realized that when your instincts start to get involved, all sorts of behaviors start to happen, and people often are puzzled by that, and they say, but I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to shout, or I didn't mean to freeze, and yet I did. So the first thing is, let's first start to build an awareness of what people's patterns of behaviors really are. What is it that makes this person their unique human being? Which is perhaps another point I'd like to make, and that is that we secretly, having come from the corporate world myself, I know that, secretly, often there'll be the sense of frustration is, why can people not just be the same? Why can people not just, everybody understand what I said in the way I said it? How come people keep misinterpreting me? Why do I have to keep repeating myself? And secretly we wish that actually everybody would be the same. But the reality is that in fact each and every human being in the world is unique. And if you think about it, just think about this. If all that human beings were walking heads, and all we had to worry about was how people thought, then yes, we could conform. We could get conformity in the way people thought, right? The snag is that we're not. We have a second part of ourselves, which is as important, if not sometimes more important, because it's not as easy to control and work with, and that is our instinctual intelligence. And that, our nervous system, stimulations and responses and all the things that happen there are actually unique to each and every human being. Each and every human being has had a unique experience from their moment of birth to where they are now. They have been influenced in unique ways, and that has settled in their bodies. So the challenge is that your average human being walks around thinking that they are living in a world that surely everybody should be experiencing. And yet the problem is everybody is experiencing their world in a unique way, a fundamentally unique way. And that creates all sorts of challenges. So let me carry on and go to the second phase of how one would work with instinctual patterns in an integral way. And that is to say, let's look at assessment. Or perhaps I should, after you become aware, is to try and help people understand, where does this originate from? So for you personally, and each person's story will be unique, is what is it about you, your life, your story, and what has happened to you that has caused you to show up in the way you are. So let's say you're somebody who loses their temper very quickly, very often, and that has caused trouble in the workplace, for example. It's about understanding, well, where did this come from? And it's possible that perhaps it came from a space where, in fact, it was important. It was a survival mechanism to be able to step forward and to become more aggressive or loud or rude when under threat, for example. So some people have found it has helped them to survive. So that is part of their survival strategy, and it is part of their success in the past. So it's, again, not about naming and shaming those what are now bad behaviors. It's about saying, I only adopted this behavior because it made sense at some part in my life. It was a survival mechanism. So can I become aware and own that at that time it was good for me to lose my temper? It helped me to offset perhaps somebody was bullying me, or a parental figure that was not behaving well. And that was good. It's just that now it's not serving me. So we need to help them own how they are. The next phase we would work at, though, is say that that's not yet enough. So I need to accept. I need to accept the fact that there is more to the world than just being prey to my instinctual patterns of behavior. I need to be able to accept the fact that there's a benefit to perhaps conforming and changing my behaviors to adapt to the world. And so that's an important point, but that is not enough. So many people who try and work with behavior change and try and saying, how do we allow for the fact that each person is unique and a human being in the workplace, stop there. And that, I believe, is the single biggest problem with many of the programs. I believe there's more than $9 billion spent globally. In 2003, there was research done, which is a long time ago, and I can only imagine the amount is way bigger now, on, for example, unconscious bias training. I believe this topic is even bigger than unconscious bias, but unconscious bias is part of this. And yet it's also been shown that the majority of that training did not result in a change in behavior. And there's a reason for that. When you look at our fourth element, is that if you don't look at the area of augmenting, you need to augment people's capacity to change their behavior. Why? Because when something is wired into your instinctual primal nervous system, it's very difficult to just change that behavior. So, for example, I might say, okay, it doesn't work to lose my temper. I need to treat my employees better, so I must stop shouting at them. For example, as a leader, I can't possibly shout at people anymore. And yet that rage bubbles up. That instinctual response is based on a pattern of behavior that helped you to survive as you were growing up or at some part in your life. There was a reason why you have that. And until you become aware of it, but then you need to have the skill to interrupt that pattern. Now, when you work with your instinctual patterns of behavior, there's really only one way, and it's not by using your head. You can't think your way into a different pattern of behavior. You have to work with what we call practices. And so practices are things that you do over and over and over again to develop new neural pathways, to develop new instinctual responses to a situation until they become unconscious habits. So it's like starting a new habit. You then have to practice it so often, so regularly, that it becomes an unconscious habit. And the way that I always feel in these conferences, what can be frustrating at times is one walks out with all these little nuggets. How much do you walk out that you can use with? So what I want to offer you is an example of a practice that I believe every single human being can do with. And that is, how do you pause and notice your nervous system, and how do you settle yourself down? And to do that, I'd invite you to either stand or sit. Take a deep breath from the bottom of your belly. If you breathe from the bottom of your belly, you are telling your nervous system you're safe. And that's the first part to change. Put your feet flat on the ground. That also tells your body you're safe. Open your hands and place them palm down on anything. Could be the desk, your thighs, the chair, doesn't matter, but palm down on something. What that does is it tells your body you're safe. And then as the last thing, press your big toe gently down, on and off, just 2 or 3 times. And if you do that, you'll notice, there's kind of an activation happening. And that's because your big toe is directly linked to your vagus nerve, which links to your entire nervous system. Just activates your nervous system, wakes it up and says, you know what? I'm safe. And now you're ready to look at changing your pattern of behavior. You can interrupt an instinctual response by, for example, that practice. That's an example of a practice. Interrupt, pause, feet, hands, breath. Now you can make a more conscious choice about what kind of behavior would you like to step into that would allow you to see your employees and engage with them as unique, wonderful human beings. So thank you for your time. It's been a real pleasure, and look forward to further dialogue. Thank you.